Before you start installing your green energy solutions, your PV array, your air source heat pump, your battery, your electric car charger, it's really important to have a plan. Now you might hope that your installers have a plan, but the only way to be sure is to ask them to show it to you beforehand and to explain it to you in terms that you can understand. This video presents a schematic overview of what's been installed at my property. It's not a wiring diagram, it's not a set of installation instructions, it's a schematic, so think of it as something like the London Underground map compared with a detailed Ordnance Survey map or something. Let's have a look at the spaces where all this kit is installed. There's inside the house, a subset of which is the loft. There's a garage which is 30 metres distant from the house, and the outside space. Outside we have the PV array up on the roof, which is wired to the inverter, the Solax inverter that we have, which is connected to and from the battery, which is also in the loft. From there's wiring down to the consumer unit and of course the electricity meter outside the house. So you can see we will draw electricity from the grid through the meter and the consumer unit into the house, or we will feed it to the grid from the PV array through the inverter and the consumer unit, and we're feeding to the grid of course unless we use it ourselves. We have in the garage a small consumer unit to which the car charger is wired. Outside we have the air source heat pump, which is wired to its controller in the loft and then down to the consumer unit. It's also wired to the hot water tank. There is a thing called an eddi, which is like a smart switch, you might say, for the immersion heater. And all of these things, the eddi, the air source heat pump controller, the inverter and the car charger, have dongles, those little orange things that have just popped up, because they all need to connect to the internet. We have broadband coming into the house, and those dotted lines signify a Wi-Fi signal, and they're not joined up because they couldn't connect. The stuff in the loft and in the garage needed to connect to the router inside the house, but were simply out of range. So we had to install a mesh Wi-Fi system. So you can see the node there, which is connected to a Netgear Ethernet switch, from which there is a cable running down to the car charger, the Zappi in the garage. There's a connection from the first switch to another switch located up in the loft. That again is hardwired, and from the switch in the loft there's a hardwired connection to the eddi. Personally, I don't trust Wi-Fi, and if I can avoid it I will, but we needed Wi-Fi for the air source heat pump controller, the EcoDan box you can see there, and the Solax inverter. So we had to have another node up in the loft providing a strong Wi-Fi signal for anything that's up in that space. Finally, there's a connection from what's called a CT clamp in the meter outside the house up to the eddi, which tells the eddi whether there is current going from the house or to the house. More on that later. But that's a kind of sum of all the wiring that you can see needs to be put in place, and it's something best not left to chance. We had all kinds of issues because people just loosely thought, oh, Wi-Fi, that'll be fine. It really wasn't. Now, I'm quite sure that a lot of stress, a lot of work, a lot of anxiety would have been avoided if we could have had something like this before we started. 1 year on, it's really helped me to put this video together, so I understand a bit better what's going on. And your installation may not be exactly the same as mine, but I'm sure there'll be similarities, at least in principle. So I hope this is of help to you too.